Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we will be heading over to the American Athletic Conference and taking a look at the Rice Owls, who finished 4-8 in 2024. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the owner and editor of The Roost. The Roost is the number one source for Rice athletic news. He is Matthew Bartlett. Matthew and The Roost can be found on X at The Roost, or I guess at The Roost. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hey, thanks guys for having me.
Appreciate you joining us again to preview Rice. And for those who are just turning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Rice football?
Yeah, this will be, I guess, year 8 of The Roost. First year with a new head coach, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, all things Rice football, baseball, basketball, everything in between.
Well, let's move over to some Rice football talk and start with the man in charge. Rice has hired Scott Abel as their new head coach. Abel comes to Rice via Davidson, where he's a head coach for the past 7 seasons. Coach Abel is the winningest coach in Davidson history with a 47-28 record. What can you tell us about Coach Abel and what he brings to the table for the Owls?
You know, Rice could have gone in a bunch of different directions with this hire. And if you looked at all of the job boards of who should Rice hire when they went out to market, Abel was not on any of them. Abel was not on any of them in the industry. This was a guy that was relatively unknown, except when you go talk to coaches and all the coaches were like, man, this guy's smart. He has a fun office. I wish he could come work it with us. So he was kind of a diamond in the rough, but Abel's calling card is he's won at places where traditionally they don't win. It's hard to win. He won at Washington and Lee, which is a small D3 school, had no success and took them to the D3 playoffs several times, won some conference championships, then moved over to Davidson at the FCS level and did the same thing. No scholarships for him there at Davidson, and still turned a losing program into a program that won conference championships. So that was kind of the vein and the mold that Rice was hoping to lean on. Go find a guy that can do it where people say it can't be done because it's hard to win at Rice. And so if anybody can, hopefully it's the guy who's done it every step of the way.
Well, Matthew, as it often happens, when you get a new head coach, that means new assistants, new coordinator. Rice is no different in that regard as Scott Abel brings over OC Vince Munch. Coach Munch spent the previous 7 seasons with Coach Abel at Davidson as the O-line coach, and in 4 of those 7 seasons, he also served as a run game coordinator. He's got the tag of OC, but who's going to be calling plays here for the Owls in 2025?
So it's Coach Abel's baby. This is his offense, and he'll tell you that. I think what was really interesting with Munch and a bunch of guys on the offensive staff, this is the first time that Abel has really been able to work with a full staff. You know, you go look at Washington and Lee. He said stops along the way. The jokes he makes is he was taping. Because he didn't have a full-time trainer at his first stop. And so he's done everything and he's used to running with, okay, we have 2 people in the offensive staff room. We have 4. Now he has a full offense. So really all that's different is Abel himself for the first time doesn't have a position group because he's the head coach. That's new. Not new to FBS football, but new to smaller schools. So yeah, he'll be running the offense and he has a position coach for every position, which is nice.
Well, can you describe the type of offense there that Coach Abel plans to run at Rice?
He'll call it a spread option or a gun option. You'll see it out there somewhere in some places as a triple option. It's not entirely true, especially when you look at like Army is probably the most traditional triple option. Think, Paul Johnson, old school Georgia Tech. It's a lot of under center and a lot of, fullback, halfback, and off the sides. Abel's option is going to be run out of spread formation. It's going to be run out of shotgun, maybe a little bit of pistol, but it's mostly going to be the quarterback back there, and his reads are going to be based off that, giving them more space. So you see a lot of guys, a lot of more involvement from what they call the slot, which is the inside receiver who in this offense might run the ball more in a game than he catches passes. So that's kind of the wrinkle there that makes it a bit different than your traditional triple option.
Well, let's start with the group that leads this Rice offense, and that's the quarterbacks. Last season starter E.J. Warner, who came in via transfer and assumed those quarterback one duties, is now off to Fresno State, leaving Drew DeVilliers as the only quarterback in the roster who took a snap in 2024 at quarterback. He saw action in 3 games and made 1 start against UConn as he preserved his red shirt. This staff also moved Chase Jenkins back to quarterback after playing wide receiver in 2024, and they bring in Lucas Shearhorn from Kennesaw State after the spring. How did this quarterback room look in the spring?
Well, it was hard to get an early read on it because you have 3 different guys, and what's unique about Abel is he's done it both ways. You think option offense, and you think fast quarterback who might throw the ball once or twice. And we've seen Abel run offenses where the quarterback has 300 carries at the end of the year and, 20 pass attempts. And we've seen him lean the other way where he's going to throw the ball 150, 200 times and the quarterback's going to run less. He's going to use his back. So a lot of it was really testing these guys out and seeing what their strengths were, how they could fit. So through the spring, it was really a 3-man race openly. I think Drew DeVilliers and Chase Jenkins really separated themselves by the end of spring. And by the time we suit up week 1, I'm thinking it's Jenkins's job to lose based on everybody I've talked to and what I've seen of him so far at Rice in the spring.
Given the wide variance in terms of quarterback usage in the rushing game under Coach Abel, what is your expectations for their utilization here for the Owls in 2025 in the rushing game?
I think it depends on who wins the job, because you look at the front runners right now. So Chase Jenkins was a wide receiver his freshman year of high school and then switched to quarterback because, as often is the case in high school football, the best player on the team, the best athlete plays quarterback. And we'll figure everything else out. We want him to touch the ball all the time. And then he really blossomed into a great quarterback in high school. He came to Rice as a quarterback, wasn't really a perfect fit for the West Coast scheme and the other arms they had in that room. So he moves to wide receiver for a year. That scheme goes away. And then lo and behold, he's the perfect option for this offense because in addition to being able to strike downfield and do things with his arm, he is one of the most dynamic runners on this team, and he can create, which is something innate and hard to teach. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think you might not necessarily with Jenkins see a ton of, like QB power and just direct called plays. I think you might see more called passes that is an open secret and understood. If the throw's not there, he can go make a play with his legs. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of with Jenkins.
Well, you just described Jenkins' playing style, but how would you describe Drew DeVilliers' playing style for someone that's never caught a Rice game?
So DeVilliers was originally committed to TCU to play baseball. So this is a guy with he's a big frame, much bigger than Jenkins, cannon arm, and more of your traditional drop back passer. He's not a statue. He can run better than you think he can, but he is not the athlete, that dynamic runner that Jenkins is. So that aspect of the offense probably goes away if he wins the job. But I think his ability to threaten you downfield is right now is probably better than where Jenkins is at. So we'll just got to see where it goes from there.
Given the quarterback battle, do you think the staff kind of wants to pick one guy and kind of run with them, or do you think maybe it might be a short leash and we see some rotation?
Based on what I've heard, they want one guy to win. And I anticipate, based on what I've been told, that Rice will have a starter midway through fall camp that's named and will be taking all the reps. I expect that right now to be Jenkins.
Well, this running back room saw Christian Francisco graduate and 3 others transfer. Coleman Bennett is off to Kennesaw State. Tajay Atkins recently hit the portal, and their leading rusher from a season ago, Dean Connors, is off to Houston. This 2025 room is highlighted by Quentin Jackson, who's their second leading rusher in 2024. The staff also added Max Balthasar from Coastal Carolina, and Carson Morgan from Kansas after the spring. How do you see Coach Abel deploying these backs in 2025?
I think this is going to be a great litmus test for this offense because the theory here is this scheme is innovative enough that I'm not going to say it doesn't matter who's running the ball because we've seen good running backs and bad running backs who can create, and there's a difference. But the hope here is you have enough open space and field in front of you that it might not matter how dynamic you are. You can get some yards. So Quentin Jackson is going to be the feature back. He's going to be one of the lead pieces in this offense because what this offense really thrives on is the versatility, the ability to deploy so many different formations and so many different looks and run the same play. It looks different to you on defense, but they're doing the same thing. And Quentin Jackson is one of the handful of guys that can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. He can line up in the backfield. He can move all over the formation. And so that's what's going to make him particularly valuable. So he's going to get the ball a lot. After that, it really is wide open. To be honest, both of the freshmen look spectacular this spring. The running back room was one of the groups that Abel most frequently talked about as one that impressed him. So I think by virtue of what the room looks like, you're going to need something from at least one of those guys, if not both. Tyvon Byers and DeAndre Hardiman, both local guys who were impressive here around town. So I think there's high expectations there. Max Balthazar played running back at Coastal, is not going to play running back at Rice. He's going to play the slot position, but he will still run and carry the football a lot. So a bit unique there. So right now, all I can tell you is I think Quentin Jackson is going to get the most carries. I am optimistic about Carson Morgan and Dalen Alexander. I think one of those two has the potential to be kind of a short yardage and one of the bigger guys that can do some damage. But after that, I don't know. I think by the time we get to October, you'll probably see a consistent 2 to 3 man rotation, but it's going to be interesting how that sorts itself out.
Well, again, this running back room is a little bit of a sight unseen for the most part, but Owl fans do know Quentin Jackson, and you've talked glowingly about him. But for those who are unfamiliar with Quentin, how would you describe his game?
Go watch the kick return for a touchdown against UConn last year. He is their primary kick returner, has been for multiple years. Just one of the most outstanding dynamic athletes in the open field. One of those guys that he's small. And so you're like, oh, I can get to him. And then you blink and he's gone. So he's got that to his game. The first time Rice fans saw him on the field, he was actually making a leaping catch over a corner down the sideline as a receiver in the LendingTree Bowl in Mobile. So you have, those are both one side, coin A and coin B of what his game is. Like, he is athletic, he is versatile, he can catch the ball, he can run and move. He's not going to be the bruiser that goes up the middle, but Rice is hoping with this offense he doesn't have to be.
Well, Matthew, at the end of the season, I guess you've talked glowingly about Jackson, but at the end of the season, do you believe he's going to lead this team in rushing, or is there someone else we need to have our eyes on?
I don't know. A part of that is just not fully appreciating how diverse this running tree is going to be. Just from body type size, this is not a guy in most college football programs that would touch the ball 250 times. But he's their most proven and talented runner they have on the team right now. So I think if I had to, lean one way or another, I'd pick Jackson. I think as far as playmakers, he's the most talented guy they got in the room and maybe on the offense. But it would not shock me at all if by the time we get midway through the year, if one of those freshmen really cements himself and kind of takes a bigger role in this offense. Can they catch up to Jackson? I don't know. I'd still put my money on Jackson. But if there is a surprise candidate, I'd probably pick one of those freshmen.
Matthew talked about these freshmen running backs. You got Hardman Jr., you got Byers. What should we expect for them? What are their type of styles? What can they offer this offense?
You know, I won't pretend to dress myself up as an ace talent evaluator, but there's some guys that you just kind of watch their high school tape and you're just like, this is a no-brainer, right? Like for Byers, was a standout at Lake Creek and just ran over everybody. Was one of the best running backs in the state of Texas. I think he ran for 30 touchdowns as a senior. And we could, high school stats are what they are, but this is just a guy who just ran over everybody and just produced. And then DeAndre Hardiman was in North Shore, which, if you know anything about Texas football, that's one of the powerhouse preeminent programs. And he's over there putting up it was like 1,500 rushing yards in 4 playoff games. Like ran for like 400 yards in the playoffs in 6A high school football in Texas. It just is one of those things. You watch these guys run and you're like, well, duh. Why doesn't everybody want them? And then they show up and they're just as advertised. So there's some stuff like just learning the offense and those reads are one things, but you talk about guys that are just natural runners. Both of them bring a little bit of something different to the table. But man, the talent is off the charts. So just to be able to get these guys into this offense and get them, both of them were here in the spring, which not typical for freshmen, especially in the group of 5. So having them here with that experience, especially we talked about the open room in that running back room after Quentin Jackson, I think both guys have the potential to be really impact pieces soon.
Well, Matthew, this wide receiver room will look a bit different here in 2025. Matt Sykes, Kobe Campbell, and Giovanni Johnson-McCray have all graduated. Ross McNeil is no longer on the roster, and we saw Ty Chakao Bowman head to UConn. However, L fans will see a familiar face who missed 2024 due to injury in Landon Ransom. Can you shed any light on Landon's injury and if we should expect to see him back on the field here in 2025?
Yeah, Landon's been fully cleared. He's been back in summer workouts and fully healthy for the first time in over a year. Missed all last fall, didn't participate in the spring. Everybody anxiously awaiting him to come back after really had an impressive. He was the starting wide receiver opening day against Texas, which is something that former Rice head coach Mike Bloomgren had said. I don't think I've ever had a true freshman start week 1 at wide receiver in this offense with how complicated it was. So he's somebody that the staff thinks really highly of. The previous staff did, and the current staff does as well. So they're anxious to get him back. He's fully cleared, and they're excited to see what he looks like in this offense because we still haven't seen it.
Well, earlier I mentioned the trio of Sykes, Campbell, and Bowman leaving. If you add Dean Connor's reception into that mix, they accounted for 458 targets, 1,769 yards, and 9 touchdowns in 2024. And while, the casual fan might think that screams opportunity under Coach Abel, as you alluded to earlier, his wide receiver 1 has historically only averaged 3 targets per game. What are your expectations for the wide receivers here in 2025?
They're pretty unknown, to be honest. You have Ransom, who hasn't played in 2 seasons. You have a bunch of guys that have been at Rice but not had a ton of involvement. Braylon Walker is the guy that right now is the veteran in that room, and he's operated as a change of pace, third receiver for most of his career. He's got talent. And when he's been healthy, he's been very productive. So they've really liked what they've seen from him. Tyson Thompson is a guy who was a standout special teamer and receiver at Houston Christian before transferring to Rice 2 years ago, but has had some injury problems. So those are 2 guys that have kind of played roles for this team in the past, but have never been the guy. And I don't know if they will have a guy. And if they do, it's probably going to be Aaron Turner, who I think might be listed as a slot officially on the depth chart, but he is going to be probably the go-to guy in the passing game and one of the key guys in the running game. Brought him in as a transfer for Cincinnati. His family brother actually played in this offense and has familiarity with Abel and this scheme. So he's new to Rice and has not played in this offense before, but as far as having a step up, that's about as good as it gets here. And he had a tremendous spring, and staff really liked what they saw from him.
During the spring, did Chase seem to have a favorite target or even Drew? or was it just passing is not so much part of the offense that it was hard to tell?
So a couple things. There was never a depth chart handed out in the spring, which is the first time covering college football, I think, that I've ever seen no depth chart. And part of that was the staff was just as new to these players as these players were to the offense. And so by the time we got to the end of spring, a pecking order started to emerge and was able to kind of, okay, these are the starters. These are the guys who are in that mix for that second team. But it really was a lot of cycling in and out with there wasn't a consistent set of guys and there wasn't, really a go-to option. And with this offense, as you can imagine, the priority is installing the running game and installing the options and those kind of components. And most of the passing game is something that they're leaving and working on through the summer, that kind of knowledge of that, and we'll install fully, get it all done in the fall. So between all of that, it was impossible to go pick a favorite target. And then the quarterback shuffle was so heavy that, I mean, it was hard to know who was in at quarterback on any particular play, let alone who they were throwing to.
Well, Matt, let's move over to the tight end group. We want to run the ball a lot at Rice. So with the coaching changes and this new offense, what have you learned how these tight ends are going to be utilized?
I think they're going to be leaned on a lot more than people might have initially thought. I think it's telling that Rice just announced its representatives for American Conference Media Days, and Micah Barnett is going to be one of those two reps. So Micah played fullback for Rice the past 3 seasons, showcased some ability, a lot of ability as a blocker, did some running, was able to catch the ball out of the backfield too, kind of a Swiss Army knife at the position. And that's what Rice envisions for this offense is guys that can do a bunch of different things. I talked about Quentin Jackson being able to play all over the field as kind of a flashier, faster guy. They kind of view Micah Barnett as the bigger version of that can do a bunch of different things in this offense. So he's the guy they're going to lean on a lot, will be on the field a lot. James Falk would be the next man up after him, who showed some really good flashes in his time at Rice. Coach is really impressed with him this spring. Just needs the consistency of someone who, like a Barnett, is entering his 4th, 5th year of college football. I can't keep track anymore, but he's been around for quite some time.
Well, moving over to this offensive line, they return an Iron Man in the center at David Stickle. Stickle started every game in 2024. This room also returns Weston Kropp and Trace Norfleet, who both showed versatility playing right and left guard, and they each got 6 starts apiece. If my math is correct, staff only brings in 1 transfer, Sean Sullivan from Yale. So I assume that the staff likes the guys they kind of have in this room. But Matt, how do you feel about this offensive line heading into fall camp?
So I mentioned the running backs being a room that got a lot of praise. The only room that topped that this spring was the offensive line, which I thought was very interesting with, again, brand new offense, something these guys have never done before, a lot of different things that they had to learn. And the biggest thing for me kind of watching was, again, cycling through it. It wasn't just, okay, who's the starting, left tackle on this play? As you go watch one play and the same guy would line up at left tackle, then he'd go to left guard, then he'd go to right tackle, then he'd go to right guard in a series. And so this spring, they're just trying to figure out where are these guys going to play in this offense, which you might not even have thought, is something that would be up for debate. But when you're changing and installing a whole new scheme, there's different things that they ask of the different positions. So they were kind of working through it. As far as right now, I think the guys that they're bringing back, other than David Stickle and John Long, who's in and out, had some injuries, those are the 2 that really have done a lot and seen a lot and seem to be fixtures into who's going to be starters this coming year. I think a lot of the other guys that end up winning those starting jobs are going to be guys who haven't played much yet at Rice in college football. I'd look at Luke Miller and Peyton Farmer, 2 guys that really stand out at tackle. And then Pat Vallant is a guy who's been special teams, third tackle kind of guy, and has kind of found a home at guard this spring.
If this line just crushes it as the praise that they got in the spring, is it because who stepped up big?
It's got to be one of the tackles. I'm going to go with the young tackles. It's got to be Luke Miller and Peyton Farmer kind of setting the tone. I think it's just impossible to overvalue how important a quality tackle play is in college football.
Who does this line look to as its leader?
That's a great question. David Stickle is one of the few returning guys on offense that was a full blown starter. I think, maybe with Micah being the other guy, Barnett, fullback, but he's changing positions. So, this is a guy who's been here and played longer than anybody. His a transfer in from the SEC, but is not the loudest guy, and not that is not the end all be all. Not everybody has to be a vocal leader, but he's probably more the guy who would like to put his head down and work than be at the forefront yelling. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. John Long kind of in that vein as well. So it's too early to tell really who's going to step up and be that vocal leader in this room. They've had that. It was Ethan Onyanwa last year who went off to Ohio State, who kind of found his voice and became a big piece. But it'll remain to be seen and see how important that is. If you have a quarterback that is really running the show and knows his stuff, makes things easier on those guys.
All right, Matt, if you were to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I'm going with Aaron Turner. I think it's a guy that a bunch of people don't know because he hasn't been a featured guy in college football just yet. But the slot receiver in this offense is going to touch the ball a lot. He's going to run the ball. He's going to catch the ball, and he's probably has the most potential outside of maybe Quentin Jackson to make the big play. So I'm going with Aaron Turner.
All right, well, let's move over to the defensive side of things. And just like the offensive side, there's a new coach calling the defense. However, Al fans should be familiar with this face. John Kay will not only coach the linebackers for his third straight season, but he also get the title of defensive coordinator added to his name here for 2025. For those not familiar with the name, John is a decorated high school coach in the Houston area with 117-18 record over 9 seasons in his past. Matthew, can you describe the defensive scheme that Coach K plans to run here at Rice?
So for those familiar with Rice, I think things aren't going to look too much different. So he came from North Shore, defensive guy, obviously had a lot of history there, won a lot of championships at North Shore, brought him over to Rice. And he was a guy that, if you ask around the state, is one of the most respected coaches in the industry, period. So when he showed up at Rice, it was like, okay, this is an open secret that you were not going to be a position coach for very long. So when the former DC Brian Smith left to go take a job elsewhere, John Kay was the first call, proverbially. I guess it was walked down the hallway and handed him the job. So defense, is going to look a lot similar. He's going to employ a similar, I don't know what we call it these days, but it's kind of a 4-2-5-esque 3-3-5 where you'll have two guys with their hands on the line all the time. You'll have a traditional defensive end, usually with his hand in dirt. You'll have a rush end, kind of that hybrid linebacker, defensive lineman, and then Rice calls it a viper, but that hybrid safety linebacker in between. So 2 linebackers who stand on the field most of the time. You'll have that hybrid guy off to the side doing a couple different things. And then really the biggest thing in this defense is you'll have 2 corners that you trust to win on islands, which is something that takes a lot of guts, but when it goes right, it works really well because we've seen Rice have one of the better defenses, in college football and in this conference when they've been able to field those type of corners, which they've had for most of the past several years.
Well, let's dig into position rooms on defense and start with the guys up front along this defensive line. The Owls will look to replace a lot of production from 2024 as 15 sacks graduate from this room. This 2025 room is highlighted by the return of Blake Banish, L. Royal Morris III in the middle, and Michael Daly and Joseph Mutombo off the edge. How did this defensive line shape up in the spring?
I think they really liked it. I think what was interesting is with this room specifically, you have a bunch of guys that have been role players at times in their career, but never been asked to be the guy. And this year, they're going to be asked to be the guy. So I think that was the thing that was most interesting to watch and develop. You had Mutombo, who kind of came in last year as a young player and kind of threw his hat in the ring for the first time. Michael Daly was a guy that you was kind of schemed into opportunities. You had so many other guys there in the room that they could lean on for the bulk of the minutes who are gone this year. So those two guys really took big steps forward. I think Blake Banish is one of the biggest and loudest guys in this room. He's going to be that fixture in the middle of the defense and has been for some time. They're still kind of working who else is going to step in alongside them in that middle. I think one name that I want to point out that is interesting would be Ejike Adele, who is coming over from Dartmouth. Rice has had basically the JUCO or the Ivy League pipeline the past couple years on defense. Have gotten Coco Coleman or Coleman Coco, sorry, 2 years ago, came in and was this team's go-to sack guy. Last year is Charlie Lewis from Dartmouth. This year it's Adele, who won the Bushnell Cup, which is kind of like defensive player of the year for the Ivy League. So he's going to plug in, and they really think he's going to play a big role on this defense.
Well, I mentioned the 15 sacks that graduate from this room, and you mentioned all the guys that need to step up. Who will this staff and team lean on to create pressure on opposing quarterbacks here in the season?
I think it's going to be Adele and Mutombo. I think those are the two guys that really have the potential to be difference makers. And if this defense goes where they want it to be, I think it's going to be one of those two guys in particular that really leads the way.
Moving over to the linebackers, this group sees Myron Morris and his 37 tackles graduate. But they returned just about everyone else from this room in 2020 that was in this room in 2024. The room is highlighted by the return of Ty Anthony Morris and Andrew Awe. How did the linebackers look in the spring?
Fantastic. This is the best room on the defense. Full stop. Ty Morris is the other representative Rice is bringing to American Conference Media Days, and has been a guy that he came in as a freshman and was just making plays. And it's just, you see those guys, the room is so full and has so much talent. They're like, we can't put you on the field every snap now, but when it's your time, we're excited. And there's guys like that in every team in college football. It's like 2 years from now, you're going to be a dude. And like last year, that was it. He was the dude, and he's going to be the leader on this defense again this year. And Andrew Alway is one of those guys that it seems like he's in his 14th year of college football, and was supposed to be kind of like a depth piece last year. And then just kind of was a guy who just kept showing up and making the play. And at some point, you might not be the biggest or the fastest or the strongest, but if you keep making the plays, they're not going to take you off the field. So for Rice to be able to return those two guys that have that level of talent and that level of experience, with Kay, who has coached linebackers for this defense and now has a couple other things on his plate, to be able to just hand the linebacker room over those two guys is really huge for the evolution of this entire defense.
Well, Matthew, let's talk about the secondary. The Owls will look to replace a pair of cornerbacks. You got Max Ahoya and Sean Fresh. As for safety, they lost 4 of their top 6 in terms of snaps, but we should see the return of Play Wyatt, who plays that Viper role that you were talking about. He tore his ACL in the first game of the season against Sam Houston last year. So let's start here. Was Wyatt able to participate in the spring, and do you expect to see him back out there for week 1?
Wyatt also not able to go in the spring, but is on track to be back and ready for the fall. So that kind of ended up basically knocking him out for a full year, which was really a bummer. But he's one of those guys that is just kind of the Energizer Bunny, rah-rah, guy for this team. So he's been a vocal leader on and off the field without him playing, and is just chomping at the bit to get back. So he's going to be a key piece in this defense as soon as he's back on the field, which I'm hoping will be pretty soon.
Well, given all the losses in this room, what are your expectations for this defensive backfield in 2025?
This was probably the group that I was most nervous about. I talked earlier about how corner in this defense, there's really not a lot of help. And so if you don't have guys that can win on one-on-ones, you're in trouble. And fortunately for Rice, I think they found some guys in the spring that they can really rely on. Omari Porter from Stanford is a guy who'd gone back and forth, played some safety, some corner, really came along and took one of those starting jobs in the spring. Staff really liked what they saw from him, really answered a lot of their challenges. And then the other guy we haven't actually seen yet at Rice is Kerry Crump, who played at Houston Christian, came from Michigan State before that, and just was just an absolute force at that level. Will be transferring to Rice. Will be here for fall camp. So my money, those be the two guys that start on out of the gate. But I think once Jarek Harper is healthy, he was a guy that they recruited from the JUCO level, but wasn't here this spring. I think Jarek Harper is a guy that you'll watch, and Ephraim Dotson is a younger guy that has really gotten himself involved and the staff likes. So I think those kind of guys that's in the mix. Levante Johnson, I guess that would have been last year the highest rated signee in Rice football history. Also had a really tremendous spring and has been in the mix too. So you have a bunch of guys in there that have talent and athleticism. It's really just seeing who can show up when the lights turn on Saturdays.
Well, Matt, if this room plays above expectations, who's one player that you think's responsible for that success?
I really do like what I've seen from Crump. I think of the guys who have the most proven on-field success at corner at the collegiate level. It's him, and I think his talent level is tremendous. So I think he can really go a long way. But at this position is a wink-link system. So who's your second guy? If Crump is going to be your great corner, your star, the teams are going to throw against the other one. So you really need two. So I think the answer might be who's the second corner. And right now, I'm not entirely sure who that's going to be. I think Porter will be the guy out of the gate and has had a pretty good spring and people like him. But yeah, this position still probably an X factor for this defense this coming fall.
All right, Matt, if you're to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Can I pick Ty Morris? Is that allowed? Ty Morris is probably the household name that most people who know Rice defense would know, but has not kind of been a name, I think, that nationally and at least at a conference level that has kind of garnered that respect before. But Ty Morris, you're looking at a 100 tackle guy. You're looking at a guy that has the potential to get up there and make some sacks, a lot of TFLs, be a disruptor. So Ty Morris is the guy who's going to stir the drink in this defense. And if he plays up to expectation and has the breakthrough season that Rice fans want him to have, that's going to move the needle for this defense as a whole.
All right. Well, we've talked offense, we've talked defense. Let's move over to the special teams. How are those units looking, and do you have any concerns heading into the season?
Kind of TBD. We'll see. It's really, man, it's so hard to evaluate specialists until we're watching games on Saturdays. Because you can see guys kick field goals and miss field goals in practice, and you can see guys boom 60-yard punts when nobody's in their face. Like it's so hard to read. At punter, they got Alex Paqueta back, who was solid last year. Not incredible, not terrible, just kind of reliable, which there's a lot to be said for just being reliable to go out there and kick it 40 yards. That's something. So he's back. He'll be their starting punter. Kicker, open competition. They brought in Chase Allen, who was a starting kicker 2 years ago at UTSA and was one of the best kickers in the conference, kind of up and down this spring. But again, spring field goals, it got to be the most fluky thing to evaluate in college football with college kickers. Like, I don't know what's harder to read. So he might be the guy, is my guess, going into the fall, and has had, again, success on Saturdays. So they feel pretty good where they stand. Those are the guys they have in the room. So I think specialized there on kicking front, they'll be all right. I think where they'll really shine is in the return game. I think Quentin Jackson will still be a fixture in that kick return battle. And Tyson Thompson took over the punt return duties last year. And on most of the preseason, all conference teams, he was either 1 or 2 in the AAC as the punt returner. So I think those two guys have the potential to really be difference makers on that phase of the game, which should be huge for this team.
Well, as we approach fall camp, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
I think on the whole, I'll give you two. I think on offense, this offense doesn't work if the offensive line isn't as advertised. I think they feel really good about it. So I'm not, I'm believing what I'm hearing, that the offensive line is going to be at a minimum good enough, and that they're really going to be able to grow, because a lot of young players, they're really going to be able to grow and develop into a unit that they can trust. But from my eyes and what I see, corner is going to be the room that really is going to be huge for this defense. Like if those guys don't step up, if they can't find two corners they can trust, that really alters what Kay's going to be able to do in the scheme and how he's going to deploy his defense. So corner is the room that I just have the most question marks about on defense for sure.
Well, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, the transfer portal, how's that changed Rice's recruiting philosophy?
I don't really think it has a ton. Bryce has been involved in the NIL game since it opened up, but for the most part, there are probably a handful of teams at the G5 level that are throwing their weight around in the NIL and house fund market. Like your Memphis's, Tulane's. There's some schools that are going to spend like power conference schools, even if they're not. So you have some of those, but for the most part, most of the peers that Rice has in the G5 level, like Rice isn't losing out on a kid to North Texas because they didn't spend enough NIL. Like the money at this level, I don't think is the differentiator in most of these decisions. So they're in there, they're competitive, they're fighting along with the market. But really, I don't think, as far as the type of players that Rice is able to get and the guys they're signing. I mean, you look at the 2026 class that AWOL is currently putting together. They have a couple guys already that they've gotten commitments from that beat out power conference offers, which is always what you want to see when you're recruiting at this level. So I don't think NIL money is a disqualifier. It makes it harder to compete against the big guys, but for the most part, these aren't swimming in the same pool when you talking about those talents. So I don't think Rice has been tremendously impacted one way or another. It's just kind of the new reality for everybody.
And I'm kind of curious with the AAC and their commitment of at least $10 million in additional benefits to athletes over 3 years. And we got to do this minimum investment program. What does that look like logistically at Rice?
It means Tim Pernetti talking a big thing for the sound bites and everybody else saying, yeah. I like Pernetti. I think he has a lot of great ideas. I think he's aggressive. I think he's done a lot of things to push the needle. And Mike Oresco was always, the former AAC commissioner, was always never afraid to call it like he see it. And he would call a spade and be out there. And I think at this level, you need somebody who's going to shake things up and is not just going to let you sit in the silence. I think Rice ran into that at the CUSA level, where they were just largely anonymous. Because some of the brands and what was associated there. So Pernetti and that minimum investment, I think there's a lot of things out there that want to put a front that the AAC is still the premier group of 5, 6, whatever we're calling it, conference. And I think that's probably still true if you look at the on-field product. But from that, I mean, the reality is, if you don't want to play this game anymore, the ship sailed a long time ago. So I think Rice and everybody here, they're in it for what it takes to play college sports at this level, and that means investment financially through these new rules. So I don't think it changed things. I think everybody is really in it again. I mean, all that really shifts from an American Conference perspective, I think, is probably on the basketball front. Memphis now gets to keep a little bit more of their money from their basketball tournament success, but otherwise everybody else is going out there and rolling with it.
While the staff at Rice has only been on campus for a short time, how do you feel they have done navigating the portal?
Pretty good, to be honest. I think they brought in their biggest needs. They answered for the most part. They needed to bring in help at defensive back. They needed to bring in playmakers and some other offensive pieces they could trust. They accomplished both of those goals. They got starting caliber guys on both sides of the trenches that they should be able to plug in at some point when they get to campus in the fall. So I think portal wise, they did well. And then the guys that they brought in, like Kerry Crump might be your starting corner, and they pulled him from the portal after the spring. So starting corners don't grow on trees. To be able to get guys that you can plug in and trust, I think is huge. I think this is going to be probably, and usually is in a coach's first year, one of the more portal rosters that they have. But for the most part, all you can really do in the spring and this late in the cycle is to make sure you bring in enough so you don't have holes on your roster. And I think they've checked those boxes.
Well, we talked earlier about Rice moving to this option style offense. What impacts do you think having 3 option style teams in the American will have on the conference, and how that impacts Rice in particular?
I think opposing defensive coordinators are going to be upset. Like I can tell you, when Rice when they had to prep for, Rice did not a home and home, but had Army as a regular scheduled opponent for several years, and it's just, man, you'd go and you'd have to go spend a day in the spring installing the option defense, or at the beginning of fall camp, installing the option defense. So then you could go dust it up and go, okay, it's week 6. Now you guys are playing the option. So it's just one more thing that's different than everything else you play against. So I think it's probably more of a pain for opposing defenses than anything else. I think for Rice, what's been the biggest interesting shift with the option is that the Rice offense really didn't practice ones on ones with the defense very often in the spring. And the way Coach Abel put it to me is he said, look, like, we're going to play the option twice, some years, once this year. So it's going to happen. But most of the time, this defense is not going to be playing an option. So why are we going to spend most of their practice time playing an option offense? It's like, that just doesn't make sense. And they're not going to see our option. It's going to be a triple option. It's not the same. So I think that's the biggest shift. Is really, it used to be, okay, option was something you dust off and you review once in the summer and kind of bring it to the forefront when it's necessary. It's going to be really interesting seeing, there's, I think, 2 teams, I think maybe UAB in North Texas play all 3 option teams in the American this year. So there's a couple schools that are going to have to get really used to it. But I think it's just it's an interesting wrinkle, which at this point, go at Air Force, like just let's bring it home, have all the option and all the academy schools in one place.
Matthew, what do you think will be the main strength of this 2025 team?
It's got to be the offense, right? That's why you hired this guy. He has an offense that, something really cool with Abel, and what he's done is Davidson led the nation in rushing. I think 5 out of the 6 years he was at Davidson, nation in rushing. Like, you're talking about an offense that will go run 500, 600 yards a game. And that's normal. So what does that look like when you're at the FBS level playing American Conference competition instead of the FCS level? We'll see. I'd love to cover a 600 yards a game rushing team. That would be awesome. But even if it's not, if this offense works, Abel's going to work. And if it doesn't, he won't.
Well, given the changes, what does success look like for the Owls in 2025?
I think what's really interesting with this team is you have a bunch of established pieces on defense. You have a couple returning coaches. You got K back. You have some guys that have been there, especially with those linebackers that played a ton. Play Wyatt is back. Marcus Williams in the secondary. Davion Hook, guys that have been around and played a lot of college football. Some veterans there. The offense, outside of David Stickle, it's a bunch of freshmen, sophomores, guys that have never really played at the collegiate level. So what Abel has told me is that this is the youngest and most inexperienced that we're ever going to be. So if anybody's going to get us, kind of, this is the year. So that's what slows him down, just that youth and inexperience. But I think that there's a path where if things come together, they can be competitive. So I think watching this offense develop, I think there's some opportunity here. And what we've seen from the American is every year you have 1 or 2 teams that are just awful and can't get out of their own way. and then teams 3 through 11 are a game or two above or below 500. So, based on what I've seen, I think Rice should be in that mix. I think they should be one of those schools that at you get to November and you're at 4 or 5 wins and you got a chance to go to a bowl game. I think they have that differentiating enough of an offense and hopefully talent to run it. So I think a successful year this year, if you can get to a bowl in year one, man, hats off. I think everybody's thrilled. But I think that's kind of the bar of what we're looking at. I think people will be bummed if this is really, a lowly season where you're not competitive. But yeah, I think that's kind of where we're shooting for at South Main. I think this team is a team that expects to be bowl caliber by the time we get to the end of the year.
So with that success and what it looks like and the schedule that Rice has, is there a particular portion of that schedule, whether it be at the beginning, the end, middle, that you're like, this is where we've got to stack wins, or this is where we get confidence from these younger guys that are going to get experience?
I look at the opener against Louisiana, and I'm really intrigued because Rice beat Louisiana at Rice 2 seasons ago, and they're a good football team. Like people, I guess this audience will probably be more familiar, but Louisiana was a team that come Halloween, their name was still alive in the college football playoff race. And they got a bunch of pieces back. So I think that's going to be a good football team. I don't think that's a game they have to win. First game, new head coach on the road. But I think it's a one where we can learn a lot. You got that in Houston right off the bat. But yeah, I'm looking probably that the first conference game against Charlotte, I think tells us a lot because that's a program that has been historically been pretty bad. Doesn't have talent, doesn't have resources, is in the same year zero, year one rebuild as you are. So can you win on the road against Charlotte with an offense you think is a differentiating part of your scheme? I think so. So I think the early portions of the season schedule are going to be really important. I think that first conference game, Abel is an East Coast guy. I spent a lot of time in Virginia and that side of the conference or country. So yeah, I think that one's going to be big. So I think there's a bunch of winnable games in here. I think this is a team and a style of offense that will sneak up and probably beat somebody that they're not supposed to beat. It's going to be consistency and can they do it the right way and make the right calls enough to not stumble and get themselves in hard situations. You don't want to be down 20 in the fourth quarter with this offense. It's just not how it's supposed to go.
Well, Matt, we covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 Rice Owls football team?
I'll say this. If any of y'all play the video game, I've been told by many people that this is going to be one of the funnest teams to play with in the video game. I think the option is naturally just a fun thing to experiment with when you're new to it. I chatted with Coach Abel a couple weeks ago, and he was really interested to see what playbook they put in for him, because obviously he was at Davidson last year. His offense has never been in this game. So I know I've been getting tagged all over social media of different people playing Rice as their dynasty team in college football 26. So I think the offense is going to be fun. I think you are going to see a lot of wow plays. It's going to be what's in the middle of those wow plays that determines how this season goes. But I think right now, I think everybody around South Main is really excited. I think Coach Abel is a guy that is easy to root for and easy to like, and everybody's thrilled he's here. But we will see what happens because everybody will feel a lot better in September when there's W's on the schedules instead of L's. But we'll get there soon enough. Like you said, football's right around the corner.
All right, Matthew, we want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it. But before we let you go, we want to give you an opportunity to highlight the work that you're doing over there at the Roost, or highlight some things that you have coming up.
Yeah, a couple things. We go through a season preview every off season, highlight a couple things on the Rice side. We're going through position by position, talking about some of the names we mentioned, some of the guys deeper down the depth chart for Rice fans. So I'd encourage you, make sure you're subscribed there, patreon.com/@theroost. We'll hit on that. We'll also hit on, we do a conference preview go through these key teams in the American, kind of key guys that are coming back, key guys that are leaving, challenges, things like that, kind of go through bit by bit. So those will all be there. And then we're working through that kind of same stuff on the podcast as well, which you can find wherever you get your podcast feed on the Dave Campbell's football podcast feed. So it's a lot, man. That this is, I feel like the off season is over. We're at July and means media days. So I guess I got to get ready to get running. That's kind of what it feels like. But thank you so much, both of you, for having me on. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Matt. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.